Welcome to the Character Sheet, your home for everything TTRPG and fantasy news. We are joined once again by a frequent guest of the channel. You may know him from his incredible work at MCDM. He is now the lead designer of the Draw Steel RPG, which is ever closer towards release. And here today to talk about some of the big changes in their latest PDF, the latest look at the Draw Steel system, is lead designer James Introcaso. James, thank you so much for joining us again.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Pete. I am super pumped to be here. I love talking with you. We were having a great chat before this. People don't know. They're not privy to the secrets.
Yes, we started like 5 minutes later than we should have because we went off on a tangent.
And we did. But yeah, I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited. I've shared with you the latest copy of our hero book for Draw Steel, which is the most up to date that we have so far. And so it's really cool that you got to see this PDF and stuff, and that now we're talking about it. So I am beyond thrilled that this game is close to coming out. I can't wait for people to play it and to start being, heroic medieval fantasy characters. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yes, and then so to start with, we've talked about a lot of these things before on the channel. We've done combat run-throughs a few times. We've done through the negotiation system, which was great on one of our last ones. So today we're going to revisit a few things that have changed. We'll get to that in a little bit, but let's start with something we haven't really dived into since the very beginning, and that is how the structure of building a heroic narrative works. Like, Draw Steel is a heroic tactical fantasy TTRPG. So in the very first section of this new book, it talks about building a heroic narrative. So how does that work in Draw Steel, and what does that mean for players?
Yeah, so a big part of Draw Steel, right? And this is a thing that we knew we wanted to do from the beginning, was nail what in game design terms, right? And now sort of casually game terms, a lot of people talk about this, the gameplay loop of Draw Steel, right? And to look at the gameplay loop, it's kind of like, what do you do in the game, right? So in D&D, for instance, right, the gameplay loop is go and kill monsters and get experience points so you can kill bigger monsters to get more experience points so that you can level up, right? And you just keep going through that loop, and it's very satisfying, right? It sounds like a Sisyphusian thing when you put it in those terms, in the loop terms, but it's good, and it leads to fun, right? We want fun to exist on a loop because then we get to keep having it. So for Draw Steel, we thought about, like, how do we support the idea not just that you're fighting monsters, but that you are heroic. And what is it that heroes do, right? And we thought, like, okay, well, in a lot of D20 fantasy role-playing games, you are incentivized to stop and rest, right? And that's important for many of those games because many of those games are kind of about the dungeon crawl and the random encounter that could happen. So resting is a risk, right? But in a heroic narrative, you rarely see the heroes take a breather except when they really need to, right? Whereas in D&D, you might be like, we're going to fight Strahd. I have a lot of spell slots, but I don't have my 7th level spell slot. So why don't we rest? Because that is going to be important for fighting Strahd, right? Even though we could go in and I could maybe be fine, right? And we wanted to avoid that impulse in Draw Steel because Draw Steel is explicitly heroic, right? You know that every hour Strahd is still alive. He's causing mayhem. He's hurting people.
Things are still happening.
Yeah, exactly. And so we wanted to make it clear that, like, heroes press on, right? There's, Captain America straps down as half a shield and stands against Thanos' army when he's the only Avenger left in Endgame, right? And so we wanted to give you that feel. And so we said, okay, well, we need to think about how do we incentivize you to push forward, right? And that's kind of what these rules are about. And how do you know when it's time to stop? And so in Draw Steel, your character has heroic resources, right? And during a battle, those resources build, right? And everybody has a different one, and they all build slightly differently, but they all work similarly. So that when you're jumping from one character to another, you don't necessarily have to relearn everything. You just have to learn, like, oh, this is how I get mine, right? And this is how I can spend it. And these are the benefits I have when I have it, right? And so, like, and we saw this when we were playing before. We saw some heroic resources, right? Like the Shadow has a resource called Insight. The Tactician has a resource called Focus, right? And as they build these things up, they can spend them to use abilities during the battle. And so the idea is that as a battle gets on, you get more options because you're building up more resources and you can do more cool stuff, right? The director also has a resource called Malice, which allows their monsters to stay in parody. And it's sort of Malice allows us to have that, you know, how in samurai movies they say that like the equivalent power of all enemy ninjas is spread out, right? So that like the last ninja the hero fights is like super badass.
Yes.
That is it's Malice helps give that feel in Draw Steel, so that even up to the last round of combat, things still feel dangerous and interesting for the player characters. That's the idea behind it, right? And so you build up these resources, but we also want each battle to get more exciting. That's also part of a heroic narrative, right? Like the when you're reading Lord of the Rings, right? Each battle gets more intense as the story goes on, and oh my god, how are they going to make it out of this one, right? And so to incentivize you to push on in combat, right? We have those heroic resources. To incentivize you to push on to the next challenge, we have this mechanic called victories. And every combat you can earn a victory after it. And you can also earn victories for successful negotiations, for solving puzzles, right? For surviving a montage test, all kinds of things. Every time you overcome a big challenge, you could earn one or more victories. And then at the start of every combat encounter, you earn heroic resources equal to your number of victories. So if you're a shadow, right? Oh man, look at all this insight I start with now because I have all these victories. And you're encouraged to press on without resting, because when you rest, what happens is all your victories convert to experience points. And that's great for the long term, right? It means that you're going to level up. But if you don't have enough to level up, it means you just lose your victories and you kind of bank them until you have more that you can turn into XP and then level up, right? And so the decision about when to rest, when you rest, you'll get your stamina back, which is important, right? Like you need stamina to survive. But most people we found in our playtesting push it right up to the edge because they want to have the maximum number of victories going into any battle, right? So it really gives you this heroic feel of like, I'm pressing on because this is the only way I'm going to be able to defeat the big bad, right? But at a certain point, I will need to stop. So if we do it well, right? Like if we design our games and our adventures well, it means that by the time you're going in to fight that big boss, you're looking at your sheet and you're like, I don't have a lot of recoveries left, which are the things that I use to regain my stamina, right? And I have a finite amount of those, and that's how I'm regaining my stamina. But I do have a heaping, I got like 5, 6, 7 victories, which means that if I go in, I'm going to be able to do some really cool stuff right away in combat. Oh, this is a hard decision, right? Like, do we stop and rest? No, we press on, right? Because this is our only chance of finding this villain and defeating them. And so that's the basic gameplay loop of how it all works.
Yeah, and that's in playtesting this, that's always been my experience, is that the biggest differentiator between this and D&D is that D&D is often a case of like your party constantly arguing to take rest, to take breaks, to interrupt the flow of combats and like the chain of stories, because it's mechanically better for them to have a short rest after every fight, a long rest after like 2 fights. Whereas in Draw Steel, the experience is the complete reverse, where your party members are like fighting, like, no, we can do one more. No, we can do one more. We can keep going for one more. And that the risk reward there is just such a gratifying part of TTRPG that you've kind of been missing in games like D&D lately, where there's not really like a reason to not short rest or long rest whenever you can. But in Draw Steel, there's a momentum that's just not in most other games. There's a reason to push on, and it's very, very satisfying as a player.
Thank you. And that's really what we were trying to solve, basically 2 issues that we could see if we had followed a D20 model, right? And the D20 model works great for dungeon crawling, which is kind of where the roots are in, right? So if that's what you're looking for, I think that's great. But for us, right, thinking about, okay, this isn't a game about really crawling into the gilded hole and coming back out with a bunch of stuff. It's about saving people, right? It's about being a hero. And so for us, we really thought about like, how do we get you to press on, right? And also, how do we make it so that combat isn't, the first round isn't, I used all my cool stuff and now I'm just shooting Eldritch Blast over and over again. How is it that like combat stays dynamic throughout all of the, throughout every round, not just the first round?
Yeah, and that's when like the game has a lot of inspirations from fourth edition, and it does. That's one of the things it really improves on in fourth edition, whose combat. I think most people love the combat and had just issues with the balancing and some of the mechanical aspects of it, but the combat was amazing. But the downside always was 3-4 rounds in, you've blown your encounters, you've probably blown your daily, and you're just doing at wills. And in
Yes.
Draw Steel, it's very much, it's almost like the reverse. I loved going into fights knowing that like I'm going to show up strong, I'm going to get stronger. I might, I could still die because I'm still going to be taking damage. I may have run out of recoveries, but I am going to show up to every fight as this sort of like battered and bruised, but like every fight with an escalating power level that makes it really, really fun to keep playing and keep pushing that luck. But there have been, speaking of fun things, there have been, besides the fact that I love a lot of the ancestries and a lot of the classes here, there have been some changes to those classes in this latest PDF and those ancestries. So do we want to go over, let's start with ancestries. What's changed since the last time backers may have had a look at some of these ancestries? Because some of them are really, I enjoy, I think, all of them, but there's some of them that are really unique spins on sort of classic fantasy racial archetypes that have had like some really nice changes to them.
Yeah. And so a big thing for us when we were getting into Ancestries was that when we put out a big playtest packet, and the devil was kind of a modular ancestry, right? You got a certain amount of devil points you could use to spend, and it was like, well, do you want really big horns? Do you want fiery eyes? Do you want a prehensile tail, right? And they all did different things, beast legs, right? And it was like, you don't get all of these things, but you get to pick and choose. It's sort of a build-a-bear method of creating
a modular demonkin.
Yeah, exactly. And so when we looked at survey feedback, people were like through the roof about the devil. And they were like, I wish that you did. Overwhelmingly, we're saying things like, I wish you had done this for dwarves and orcs and elves and humans and yada, yada. And we were like, huh, okay. Well, we could give it a shot and see. And it's actually a conversation that we had earlier. Matt had said to me, I think what we're doing for the devil, we should do for everything else. And I was like, I don't know. I don't think people are going to want that. It's going to be a lot to play test all of those different combinations. Do we really want to do that? Yada, yada. And then the data came back and I had to go to him and say, well, you were right. And I think we should do it. But look, you knew what the people wanted. And so let's go do that. And so we've done that now, which has allowed us to create some really cool possibilities when you start to think about like, what else, other than these core 3 to 4 things, right? Like, what else do we think that elves should be able to do? And it doesn't need to be, right? It takes the handcuffs off a little bit because it's like, well, it doesn't need to be all elves. We're not saying all elves do this. We're saying some elves can do this. We're saying that some humans can do this. Some polder, right? That kind of thing. Polder are basically our version of halfling. And so we started to get into that. And we also have introduced more ancestries. So one of my favorites is we have an ancestry called the Hakan. And the Hakan are a big, tall, stony, giant people. They're like 10 feet tall, right? When you play Hakan. And they have this ability called Doom Sight. And the way Doom Sight works is you know when you are going to die, right? And you predetermine this, and it is a purchasable ability. You don't have to take it if you're a Hakan, right? And essentially, if you take it, you can't die. When you would normally die, you're reduced to a pile of rubble that then reforms like 12 hours later. But when you come upon the scene of your death, which is something you can predetermine with your director or write on your own, you basically become like Uber, right? Like in that final scene, you are going to be able to like succeed on all your rolls and do amazing things and get extra actions, but you will die. It is guaranteed you will die, and you will not come back, right? Like you can't be brought back by any means when that happens. Now, obviously, people can overwrite it. I'm not your dad. You can do whatever you want to the rules of the game. That's what's great about role-playing games. But so we have stuff like that where we were able to like get a little bit more like frisky with the design, where it was like, yeah, what if we said, that woad elves have this innate plant ability where they can bring plants up out of the ground to like grasp people with vines. Not all wood elves, but some should be able to do that, right? Like that's a cool inherent connection that they might have. What if we said that polder have this natural connection to shadow sometimes, which makes them more likely to have a resistance or immunity to corruption damage, right? That kind of thing. And so it allowed us to explore those places and allow people to get more customizable with their ancestries in a way than we hadn't been doing before, which was basically like, you're a human, you get these things. You're an elf, you get these things. Now it's like everybody has one signature trait that all people of that ancestry get, and then everything else is Build-A-Bear, which is fun.
Yeah, and that's amazing. That's one of my favorite changes. Is that if you look at any ancestry in this book, you will see, like you said, the one signature race, and you'll have a set amount of points, and you can spend those points to customize your version of this ancestry in 6 or 7 different ways, which makes for really, really in-depth character creation, but it's still very approachable and like it makes a lot of sense. But it gives you a flexibility. And like I said, the devil was one of my favorite ancestries before for that reason, because you got to, sort of plug and play with the abilities you wanted, and having that for all races makes, you get cool stuff like Doomside. It's silly. I love this. I'm looking at it now, the systematic mind one for the mnemonics, because I love the idea of like, I'm a super cartographer. Like, I just remember where like all the lay of the land, and I can just, if it's a map, I just know it immediately. But it's one of the best approaches to creating a fun and unique ancestry or race that I've seen in a fantasy game, and I'm super excited that every class now gets to benefit from it, or every race. But speaking of classes also had some changes, and we wanted to dive into that for a second.
Yeah, so we've got all 10 levels of our 9 classes out there right now, right? And they've been through changes big and small, right? So some things that we were looking into, it was like, okay, the Null has been through the ringer. So the Null is an unarmed psionic warrior, right? Who basically they have powers that dampen other people's supernatural abilities, right? And special things that they can do. So the idea is they have a field around them, which we call the Null field, or the Null fielding for you Taskmaster fans and Mighty Boosh fans out there.
And weirdly great British Bake Off fans.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's probably the biggest thing that Null fielding has done. And so, right, you've got that. You've got this field, this aura that you project that dampens the abilities of other people and makes it easier for you and your friends to resist them. And then you can do all of this special stuff within the field. And it took us a long time to figure that out. At first, we were like, well, first they dampen magic. And then it was like, well, magic itself is not a thing that comes up in every combat. So it feels like the Null is special sometimes, but not always. And we didn't like that, right? So we're like, okay, well, what else can the Null do? Well, maybe it's magic and psionics. Well, we still have the same problem, right? So we're like, well, what about we also get in just like normal special abilities, the things that you spend malice on basically can be affected by the Null. And that felt good, right? That felt really good. And then we're like, and what if the field is based on the subclass, the kind of Null you are, also does different stuff. So you're not just dampening people. Maybe, if you're cryokinetic, you're able to like move people around with cold winds, or, if you're a chronokinetic, you can like slow people down, stuff like that, right? So we started to talk about that. And then maybe you can grow this field, right? And all that kind of stuff. And we're like, but it's not just about the field. You're also kind of a badass superhero, right? You're the person who goes up and punches someone with a sword, right? So how do we make that cool? And we start to expand that out and say like, okay, we have all these moves that you can naturally use where anybody can grab somebody, right? Anybody can shove somebody, right? So how do we make it so that the Null is really, really good at that, right? And we're like, well, you probably use different stats, but then you also get to, very simply say like, you get to add, if you're a bigger creature, right, you're better at grabbing people, you're better at shoving people around. And so we said, well, your size for the purpose of these abilities is increased by your intuition, right? The stat that is about being like world-wise and stuff, right? The thing that we would expect a Null to have. And so it's like, okay, well now as a Null, that means I can like get out there and shove dragons around, right? And grapple dragons and ogres and stuff like that. And that felt really cool. So we did a lot of in-depth exploring. The Null was one that we really, really looked hard at to make work. We've also been taking we took like some long, hard looks at our Troubadour class and our talent class. So our talent class they can go into heroic resource debt. They have a heroic resource called clarity, and they can spend more than they actually have. And when they do, they become strained, right? And when you're strained and you're using your powers, sometimes they have these strained effects, right? That mean like something good happens and often something bad happens, right? In fact, always something bad happens, often something good too. So it can mean like, hey, maybe it dazes my enemy, which is a condition that makes you take fewer actions, but it also dazes me now. Whoa, right? And when you're strained, you're taking damage. And we had to like get the balance of those things right to make it attractive enough to go into strain, right? But also not so attractive that it's a thing that you just always want to do and who cares, damn the consequences, right? We want that to be part of the fun of playing the talent, is balancing that. And I think we figured that out pretty well. That was a lot of doing math. And also on the math side, we did a lot of taking abilities and trying to make their damage scale a little bit better by adding your characteristic scores, which increase as you go up to certain abilities, but not to others. Because there were some we were like, well, this damage gets spread around, right? And so we don't need it to scale, but this damage we do need to scale because it's against like one specific creature. And eventually that doesn't feel as good as spreading the damage around. But if it gets higher, right? And so figuring all of that out was a big help. The Troubadour, one thing that we really nailed down was how do their routines work, which are now called performances. Troubadour, as a Troubadour, you can perform, right? And they are these things that like, basically at the top of a round, you decide what performance you're doing, and it can let you do everything from heal allies to help them move around, to strike enemies with lightning and thunder, right? Like you get a whole bunch of them that you get to pick, especially if you're our virtuoso subclass of Troubadour. And so doing that and figuring out exactly how does that work. Okay, it starts at the top of the round. Here's when they should trigger, right? That kind of thing. Was really good and satisfying. And it seems like people are having a lot of fun playing the Troubadour now, which is great.
I think the last time I made characters in this, we did the Troubadour, and I love the idea now of one of the big complaints about playing a bard type character in other games is often like in D&D, like their one performance thing they do is counter charm. There's like I play my lute and charming is harder, but that's about all they do. And in Draw Steel, they have your performances matter so much more, and the impact. It feels like this is what a bard or a skald should be like in a game. Like the music has an impact. Whatever your performance has an impact. And then for the Null, I'm excited to try the new Null because I was playing a Null chronokinetic before, but the new changes look really interesting. And that's like I think the next character I build is going to be a Null chronokinetic again because that seems really good. But these basically having gone through this a few times, like if you liked your class in the last PDF, your class has only gotten better. Like you guys have been very on top of taking feedback and not breaking things, but applying buffs and tweaks as necessary to keep them all, like you're saying, interesting, and to have that, especially with like the talent, having that risk reward that was such a big part of that class when it was first when it got a sort of like pilot introduced into 5e and the talent book from MCDM. So you recaptured that like fun risk reward mechanic that was so central to them. And I think now it's in a really good space where you're going to have a lot of fun debating how far you push things, which is what makes that class so fun to play.
Hell yeah, and it's great, right? Like we love to be able to do that stuff. I love to hear that from people, right? And huge props to Willie Abiel, who did the Troubadour, and Robert DeJordovich, who worked on the Null, right? They're staff designers here at MCDM, and they really put the time and care and thought into like, what are these classes about and how do we make sure that we don't lose that, right? And so what you're talking about with the Troubadour, right? Like those performances were really important to Willie, made sure he got them. The Null, right? The chronokinetic Null, Jordy kept saying like, I want this to be kind of like you're playing the flat, right? Like you can manipulate time in your own body so you can move really fast, and everybody else, you look like a blur to everybody else, right? And I think he really nailed that.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. And I think let's wrap up with an often ignored part of adventuring, the downtime projects. Also, as a part of this, and as someone that has always loved wanting more crafting in TTRP, like actual mechanics for crafting, and just never gets it. I cannot express how happy I am that all the items in this game effectively come with recipes. Like if it's in the treasure book, if it's a piece of treasure, there's a recipe on how you can make it, and making that is part of these downtime projects. So let's talk about some of these downtime projects, which can be everything from repairing a row to building an airship, and just sort of how those all work in Draw Steel.
Yeah, so we wanted to give you so one thing is, right, when you take a respite in Draw Steel, which is our version of resting, it is not just like going to sleep, right? So like just sleeping during the day, right? You can do that, and you don't have to regain your stamina and your victories reset, right? Because we want people to be able to press on, but we also want the timeline to make sense. And so we don't want it to be like, well, you slept, and so sorry, right? Like that's what happened. And so we've said, okay, you know what? A respite is when that happens, when you regain all your stamina and recoveries, and when your victories convert into XP. And that is a 24-hour period, right? And we thought, like, well, what else should happen during that 24-hour period? And we're like, well, downtime stuff, right? Like a big part of games, it can be like researching where is this item that we need, or who do we think is we could use as allies, right? Or hey, we need this item, let's build it, right? We want to build. I was in a game where Matt's character built a catapult, right? Because he wanted to be able to siege a castle, right? And he's like, well, let's start building a catapult. Come on. And so those are the kinds of things we want people to be able to do. We also want to be able to give the director control over when that can occur, right? Like if we could all just build a Vorpal sword whenever we wanted, right? It would make things, it would make the game easier, right? And so it's controlled through, hey, you have to have that recipe, and you also have to have any special ingredients. Often for crafting things, you need special things. It can be things like, an emerald washed in the tear of a dragon, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so you kind of get to control that. So you can find items, you can also craft items, right? And the more common the item is, the less powerful the item is, the more sort of common the ingredient is that you have. Language plays a role in this, right? Like if do you speak the language of the recipe? If you don't, you can still try to craft it, but it's harder, right? That kind of thing. And we have other downtime activities that you can do without recipes, right? We have like go back home and visit your loved ones is one that you can do. We have fishing as a downtime activity. It was a mini game basically that Willie Abeel felt really passionate about, and people love it, right? So like all you need to fish is a body of water with fish in it. And so we have all of these different things that you can do now with your downtime activities. And essentially the way it works is, hey, during your downtime, you make a roll and you have a project tracker right on your character sheet, and you add the result of your roll to that project tracker. When you hit the goal of the project, that thing is complete, provided you have the ingredients or whatever. And then we give the director a bunch of advice about, like, here's how you can interject different events to make the downtime more interesting. Or if you just want them to do it, go for it, right? Like that's part of it. So, but we also know that like sometimes people want to be able to press on, right? And they're like, I would love to be able to sit here and craft, but there's an evil necromancer trying to take over the land, and so I only get to make a project roll like once a week. How am I going to do this? Well, there's a couple of different things you can do. The first is, if you are a director and you don't want people to craft at all, you can just give the magic items, as you would in a D20 fantasy. Great, good, awesome. You could also give people artisans and sages who are followers who, hey, we stay back at the home base and we will craft stuff for you. Just tell us what you want, right? Because we're dedicated to the cause. We believe in you. We want to help you out, right? You're like Q kind of in James Bond, right? And then you can also find manuals which can cut project times down, right? A manual is, hey, here's a shortcut in the recipe that you're using. It just automatically adds X number of points to your project when you read it, right? So there's a lot of different things that you can do to manipulate the time, make it go faster or slower, have people find ingredients or not, so that you as the director still have some control over the power level characters are getting from their downtime activities, right? That's a big part of it. But it's really fun. Running downtime is really great. People get to explore their characters. Interjecting events into it is really fun. So I am really proud of the downtime system because it lets people also creative problem solve, right? So like I've seen people say like, well, how are we going to get from point A to point B? Well, I have this. should we stop in this town and start building an airship and see if we can get people to help us and blah, 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 and then we'll be like, that's amazing, right? To me as a director, it's like, that's cool that you're going to do this and try to build an airship because you realized you have the right ingredients to make it happen, right? And so those are the kinds of things that I love.
I love that there's a chance that you've even found a way to incorporate rolling and like an interactivity part of it, in that every time you do your downtime activity, you make a roll. If you crit, if you get like that 19 or 20, you get a chance to roll again. And every downtime activity has a set number of points you're looking to acquire. So it may take you a few downtimes to do a particularly big project, like build an airship or build a teleportation circle, which is something else you can do, which is fun. But I love that there's an element of luck to it. There's a role you get to make for it, and it doesn't just feel like a box you check and then move on. It's like it's an activity you get to do while you are in this downtime setting, which is something that's really missing in most other TTRPGs. Is like, oh, we're taking a rest and like fade to black next day.
Exactly. And the thing that is fun about being able to make those breakthroughs, right? Like the 19 or 20, is that in addition to that, you can work on projects together. So let's say, right, like, oh, I don't really know what I want to do for my downtime project, but Pete seems to really want to get this teleportation circle done. I can help. And so I just roll and you add my total to your total. And that's how many points we accrue because we work together throughout the night, right? And so I've seen bigger projects can come together much quicker when everybody says, you know what, we should all focus on this. And suddenly what was happening at a certain rate is now happening 5 times faster, or like, hey, get the followers involved 10 times faster now, right? Which is cool. It's great to see.
Yeah, it's not to pick on D&D, but like with the Bastion system on D&D, it always felt like my character who is just fighting a dragon has to come back, and it's going to take him, let me check here. Oh, it's going to take him 10 days to brew a healing potion. Unless he brings in a couple of like servants, and it'll take him 8 days to do. It's just, and then you have to like sit there and delay. The best part about the downtime actions, they don't necessarily even delay the story because you take these breaks so infrequently, because it's all about pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing through encounters and combats, that when you do get to them, it just feels like a new event. You're doing something. You have something to do, which is a huge part of why this game has a sort of level of momentum you don't see, is that even the downtime is doing something, leading back into a repetition of the start of that combat cycle, and then off you go again.
Got it. Yeah, I well, thank you very much for the kind word, Pete, the kind words. And we did really want to think about every aspect of this and try to make it fun, but also try to make it, for people who don't want that. Like, you don't need to engage with the downtime system if you don't want to, right? But hopefully we've made it so you want to, and I love to hear that like you're excited, because the other thing you can do is you can take multiple respites in a row, get to make multiple rolls, right? If you're like, we're taking 3 days here, well, that's 3 rolls that you get to make, so that's good. Yeah.
All right. And if you're very curious about, what all these changes we're talking about are, by the time this video comes out, which I believe will be on the 29th, and the next day, if you're a backer, you should check your email, because you too will have access to all these changes. It will come out on the 30th. So stay tuned. You will finally get to see.
It may come out on the 31st.
It may come out on the 31st. Well, one of those 2 days it will happen. But you will finally get to see all the cool stuff I've been looking at for the last 2 weeks. I can't wait for the rest of you guys to see it and experience it. Draw Steel is, as I've been talking about for this entire year, shaping up to be one of the biggest releases of the year, and nothing about that has changed in my latest view of the PDF. So, James, again, thank you so much for joining us. We always love having you on the channel. And
thank you for having me, Pete.
Yeah, check out the Draw Steel. If you're not a backer, fix that problem immediately, and join us in playtesting this incredibly fun world. And we will be back with more Draw Steel coverage as more and more things happen as we get closer and closer to that final release date. So, James, again, thank you so much. Guys, do the liking and the subscribing, all the YouTube stuff, and we will see you tomorrow with another video.